I'm going to be making a giant library that houses every single librarian villager type, all to get infinite access to every single type of enchanted book. Now, our library is going to have to hold a total of 38 villagers, which means we're going to need a pretty large area for that to be accomplished. And I'm thinking right next to our villager trading hall in this area right here should do the trick. Now you might be confused a little bit why I'm building basically 2 trading halls. This main one that we did a few episodes is housing all of our basic villagers, which means that we have every single type in here, including our librarians. Well, 2 librarians. I'm not sure how that got in there, but just 2 librarians isn't going to do. As like I said, there's about 38 enchanted book options available to us in the game, and I want all of them. So we're going to build an entirely separate trading hall just for our librarian villagers. Now I've already planned out what I want this library to look like in a creative testing world, and we are going to need a lot of different materials here. So as per usual, let's slap down a chest monster. And we can kick the episode off right with a material gathering montage. I started off going from the least amount of items needed to the highest, since I figured that would be easier. Most of the small amounts were for decorations, and most of the large amounts were for our core building blocks. I gathered everything that we would need going from 1 spruce door all the way up to 806 stripped spruce logs. RIP my axe, my hand, and the last 3 hours. Once all of the easy stuff was done, it was time for the last 3 harder items. First up, I needed a lot of bookshelves. I needed a little over 4 stacks of bookshelves, and I chose to acquire them by trading with my librarian back at the village. I spent over 3 real-life days here AFKing the iron farm, trading that iron for emeralds, and trading those emeralds for some bookshelves. Next on the list, I needed some bone blocks, so I spent a few hours AFKing our skeleton farm. And then finally, for the last block, I needed copper. I made a drowned copper farm in the first episode, but it doesn't produce nearly enough copper for the builds that I usually do. So I'll have to replace it sometime in the future episodes, but for now, I spent a few hours mining with my Fortune 3 pickaxe to get the last bit of resources that I would need. And as an added bonus, we got tons of other materials as well. Things like coal, iron, redstone, and more importantly, a couple of extra diamonds. And now that we've got everything together in these chests, I think it's time that we go ahead and start building the first part of the library. The first thing that I did was clear out the area of spruce trees right next to the trading hall. 1, because it was getting a little bit ugly, and 2, because I'm planning on replacing them with some much nicer looking trees later in this episode. Next up, I want to get rid of all of this puzzle, which is, to say the least, going to be very, very tedious. So I'm just going to head around and dig up the dirt and replace it back down. I also made sure to clear out an area big enough for the library that we're building today. Now I just need to move all of this somewhere over here. And now that all of our stuff is out of the way, we can go ahead and start placing our schematic. And now that all of that is in place, we can start building the very first half of this build. Using the Litematica mod and the Easy Place feature, I flew through this build, converting the library that I designed in my creative world over into my hardcore world. I had a lot of fun designing the interior of this build, and I'm super excited to show it off later in this video. But before we can get to finishing the rest of the build and showing off the inside, I think that we need a little bit of a break. Every episode, I've been doing a quality of life segment where I basically improve something that already existed into the world or add something new. And in the last episode, I added this little room off to the side of our bedroom in the main base, where we have all of our different types of armor with all of their designated tools in the bottom barrel. And for this episode, one of you guys suggested that we need some trees on our island, and honestly, considering how barren it is, I couldn't agree more. I rarely build custom trees in Minecraft because honestly, I'm terrible at them. So you'll only really see them on my channel in videos like the Choose My Fate series, where it wasn't really my own volition, or in videos like this, where it was one of your guys' suggestions, which I'm more than happy to build. I just hope you aren't too disappointed. To plan these guys out, I hopped into a creative world with a couple of reference pictures and came up with a medium and a small tree design. Now that we've got our trees all ready, we just need to put them in a couple different spots around the island. For the big trees, I decided to put them right next to the library, the barn, and the trading hall. And honestly, the hardest part was finding a way to get down from the trees. Then for the small trees, I put another one right next to the barn, next to the library, and finally between the library and the trading hall. And I think these ended up looking absolutely amazing. It definitely adds a lot of depth to the world that we didn't have before, especially since for now we only have the 2 buildings over here and just the 1 barn in the industrial section. It was starting to feel a little bit empty, and I think that those trees filled in all of the spaces perfectly. So thank you again for leaving that suggestion, and if you guys have any other suggestions, please do leave them in the comments because I would love to do them in a future episode. And now that we have our distractions out of the way, I think it's time that we finally finish off our beautiful, beautiful library. And since that's basically all I've done this video, what's better than, in the form of a time lapse, eh? And I actually think this ended up looking really, really good. I had a little bit of a difficulty designing it, just because, really, what does a library truly look like? Especially in Minecraft, because most of what is a library to me is the books on the inside. So you can kind of tell that I tried to be able to see all of the books and the librarians working in there through all the windows, so you can kind of get the same vibe from the outside as you would on the inside. And I think that accomplished it pretty well. And now all we need to do is finish getting the rest of these librarian villagers into these little stalls that I've made for them. First, I started off by breeding the villagers one last time, so that they filled up all 40 of the beds. Next, I needed a way to get the villagers out of the pit, so I made up a contraption using a dropper and some minecarts. Using this system, I could safely pick up a villager in a minecart once they were standing on the rails that I had placed down. The rails sent them directly to the compartment that I had already set aside for them in the library. Now that I had a way to get them in, I could start on the first floor. I began by filling in the larger compartment I made with 3 villagers. I then duplicated this same process over onto the other side of the library, which had also had 3 villagers. And there actually ended up only being 2 villagers on this side, and I have no clue where the third one ended up. Next up, I started working on these smaller stalls on the first floor. There were 5 of these in total, and they were significantly easier than the stalls that had 3 villagers in them, so I got them done fairly quick. One thing that I thought was kind of funny about these guys is their beds are actually pretty far below where they're actually standing, because I put them into the floor, just to save a little bit of room. And because of that, it kind of gives them this vibe that there's these really, really short librarian clerks, which I think adds some really fun personality to these guys. So now we have some tall clerks and some small clerks. For the second floor, we had 2 random librarians in both of the corners in front of the stairs. Then I started to fill in the villager slots in the right wing, and one of these villagers on their very first try gave me a mending book. So I quickly paused to lock in that trade. Now I don't have to transport my mending villager all the way from the village to my island, which is pretty good. A majority of this process was just the same things on repeat, placing rails, putting a villager in a minecart, making sure the villager can't get out of their slot, and then letting that villager out of the minecart. I basically just copy and pasted this entire process onto every single section of the library. And finally, I spent over 4 hours re-rolling the trades of every single villager until I got the ones that I wanted. And as I was going through them, I realized there was quite a few books that I was okay not having in my library. So the total count decreased from 38 villagers to roughly 29 villagers. I took out the trades for Bane of Arthropods, Curse of Binding, Curse of Vanishing, Frostwalker, Knockback Smite, and Fire Aspect, because I didn't think that they were all that useful currently. I also didn't get Breach or Density because I haven't updated my world to 1.21 yet, and I believe those are for the new hammer that was just added. But besides those, we have every single enchanting book we are ever going to need in this library. And now that we are finally done with this project, it's probably about time that I give you guys a tour. So right as you come in the front door, you're greeted with a grand staircase with Gerald on the side meeting you. And you can head over to the left wing where I kind of tucked in all 3 of these guys back here. These ones are trading Infinity and Sharpness. Then right behind the staircase, I snugged in all 5 of these guys: Trading Riptide, Luck of the Sea, Fire Protection, Aqua Affinity, and Piercing. Now I made sure to put a sign on most of these so we knew what all of them were without having to go up and click them to trade with them. And then finally for this first floor, we've got this area right over here with Projectile Protection, Respiration, and Loyalty. And this guy is very, very happy to sell. I also added a giant stack of bookshelves all along in these corners just to fill in the space a little bit more and make it nice and cozy. Then heading up onto the second floor, don't mind this, it got blown up by a creeper, I'll fix it. But we've got some villager stalls in the corners right here, right as you come up the staircase. This one is trading lure, and that one is no longer trading, for obvious reasons. I also thought it was kind of cute to put this little table right as you enter the second floor. Then we can head over onto the 2 sides. For both of them, they're just mirrored. I just added a cute little reading nook area with some benches and a table. And back here we have 3 different villagers. So on this side, we've got our Mending villager and our Thorns villager. And I forgot to write it on a sign, but this one is the Protection 2 villager. I guess we need a stronger door. Anyways, Gerald, please. For the last section on this second floor, we just have this back wall. This one's got our Fortune villager, Loyalty, no one in there, and our Depth Strider. And these 3 right here decided just not to trade anything good, which is another reason why I just canceled out some of the book trades that were available, because I wasn't getting them at all, and it didn't seem that worth it to trade for another 4 hours just for, you know, Curse of Vanishing. And on this right hand nook, all we have over here is the multi-shot. And if you're wondering why a bunch of these are empty, it's because I made way more pods than I needed, so it's not that we don't have all the villagers we're supposed to. And for our very 3rd floor, I actually made a secret entrance. You have to jump up onto this ladder, and then right as you get up, you're in this little nook right here where I had an extra guy, and he's selling quick charge. And I wanted this to feel like it was like the extra villager sections, like the storage for all the extra pods, if that makes sense. So we've got all of these up here, and then one in the corner and one in the other corner. These guys are selling Blast Protection, Silk Touch, Channeling, and Feather Falling, and these guys are doing Efficiency, Looting, Feather Falling, and Punch. I accidentally did 2 Feather Falling. We're not going to talk about that. And then finally this last guy over here in the corner sells Power, and that is this entire project finally completed. I had a lot of fun this episode designing the library, and of course designing all of our different tree variants to go around our island. And I am most definitely, as most projects are with villagers, done dealing with them for a solid moment. So if you guys happen to enjoy, which I hope you did, then please consider subscribing because I would love to see you guys in the next video. And speaking of next videos, here's a couple that I think that you would enjoy.